Hello, friends. It's Good Friday, the day we commemorate Jesus' death on the cross. Years ago, on another Good Friday, I was straightening up the small chapel following the evening's liturgy. Someone had remained in the shadows of the chapel to pray. I couldn't quite make out who it was, but I could hear her crying. I made my way quietly to see if I could sit with her for a while. We sat in silence, and then she grabbed my hand. "Every year," she said, "I hear this story. And every year I want so much for the ending to be different. And it never is." She didn't have to tell me why she kept coming back each Good Friday, even though it pained her deeply. She needed to feel that pain, to experience God's deep love as displayed on the cross. Many people, good and faithful people, want no part of that pain and choose to skip the Good Friday liturgy because of it. Personally, I need to bear witness to this darkest moment in history, which also holds the greatest love God offers. I need to be here to be reminded that the worst we can do, the very worst we can do, cannot kill the love God has for us. We cannot ignore the pain of the cross. We can pretty it up by calling today Good Friday, or by wearing beautiful crosses as jewelry. But we cannot ignore the questions the cross stirs in our souls. What just happened? How did everything go so wrong? Was this violent end part of God's plan? Did Jesus die in my place? Am I why Jesus died? Here's what I believe. As Jesus moved steadily toward Jerusalem at the end of his ministry, I believe he stood for love and reconciliation to the end, and his message of peace led to his violent death. His faithfulness to God's vision for all of creation led to betrayal and alienation. All who followed him failed before the power of the Roman Empire, but he never gave in, and his love for us never failed. I believe that Jesus died in the way he did because this world is sinful. Because from the beginning, humankind has always believed that violence somehow will solve some things. Because humankind insists on putting up barriers to God's love. And God's love, they thought, was destroyed when Jesus was killed. I believe Jesus' suffering and death is the ultimate in God's pattern of holy reversal. These ironies are painful and disarming. Jesus' message of peace led to violence. His faithfulness was countered with betrayal. His meekness was met with mockery. The most powerful of all, God's very own Son, became absolutely powerless. This Jesus who hangs breathless on a cross, whose figure we can barely see through our shame, demonstrates a God whose creation matters and whose creatures make a difference to God. This Jesus demonstrates a God whose purpose was not deterred by pain caused by the very creation that he shaped. I believe God's love for each of us and God's love for all of us has no limits. I believe Jesus wasn't put to death for doing something wrong. Even Pilate admitted that. But because somebody needed to be right. That is our tragic downfall, needing to be right no matter the cost. And on that day when humankind was at its worst, I believe God was at God's best. Jesus' humiliation and death points to God's unending willingness to participate in creation. For even death is now made holy because Jesus himself has been there. An innocent, peace-loving man died that day. And in my darkest days, it frightens me to think that it might have meant nothing because we have learned nothing from it. As horrible, as needless, as bloody as that one death was, the continuing tragedy is that the violence has never, ever stopped. The challenge for us is to get beyond this horror and yet not believe it behind, to learn from it in order to change everything, or to change something, or perhaps, dear God, to change just one thing about this broken world. I believe we must feel that grip of death and evil so close that it enrages and enlivens us and moves us to respond to God's love for us with compassion and action. I believe that if the cross focuses us only on personal devotion, then we do not honor the life or the death of Jesus Christ. In many parts of the world, this image of a suffering, dying God, which we may wish to recoil from, this image is comforting. A suffering God suffers alongside the oppressed, the hungry, the abused, the emotionally tortured, the dying. I know that we are surrounded by those whose lives are filled with pain and suffering. We live and work with those who are aching to know of God's great love for them. And we honor Jesus when we work to bring God's love to any who suffer or hunger for God. If we matter to God, if we mattered enough for Jesus to offer his life for the world, we must matter to those around us. If God's love matters to us at all, we can be the ending that my weeping friend hoped for. I believe we can make a difference to those who suffer beside us. I believe that we must make a difference to those who yearn to know of God's great love. A difference that we can make in the name of the crucified Christ. God bless each of you.